Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. After U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff's recent talks in Moscow, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that this is the first time Russia has made clear to Washington its conditions to end the war. Rubio highlighted the need to hold more talks on the issue of Ukraine and the European allies. Rubio said that the talks in Moscow were productive, with new, previously undisclosed details regarding ending the war. The official stressed that if there is further progress towards securing peace in Ukraine, there will be a chance for President Trump to meet with both Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. Rubio also expressed hope the meeting would happen, and I quote, soon, hopefully in the near future, but of course a lot has to happen before that happens, end of quote. According to a Gallup poll published on Thursday, 70% of Ukrainians want a peace agreement negotiated as soon as possible. The survey of 1,000 Ukrainians aged 15 and over, excluding Russian-occupied territories due to lack of access, shows waning optimism from citizens about Ukraine's future. Only about one-third of Ukrainians believe the country will join NATO within the next 10 years. Additionally, support for continuing the fight against Russia has dropped sharply from 75% in 2022 to just 25%. With only about 25% expecting lasting peace in the next 12 months and 70% considering it unlikely, the national mood in the country remains bleak. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will call various European leaders today to hammer out the key details and priorities of a proposed war-ending summit next week. The meeting, spearheaded by U.S. President Donald Trump, would bring Zelensky face-to-face with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. We're joined live now by our EU correspondent Angela Skujins from Brussels. Good morning, Angela. So, which European leaders will be briefed today, and on what will they be briefed exactly?
Yeah, so the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be hitting the phones today. He stated that he already has a phone call scheduled with the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and has reached out to his colleagues in France and Italy. We can safely assume this would be him phone calling and speaking to French President Emmanuel Macron and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Now, in that post on social media platform X, he outlined the key priorities of this phone call, which would centre on that proposed summit by US President Donald Trump, bringing together Russian President Vladimir Putin as well as that Ukrainian president, perhaps as early as next week. The details of that are yet to be seen, but we know that Ukrainian president has already identified what he wants to come out of a meeting such as this, the first being an immediate ceasefire reprieve for that war-torn country, which has been pummeled by Russian invasion for over 3.5 years. The second being he wants a formalised format where he can ensure support from his European allies, this tying into that third priority being a long and just lasting peace. He stated that European allies as well as his partners in the US are really pivotal for securing a long and just lasting peace, whether that will be through security guarantees, boots on the ground, that is yet to be seen. We're hoping to find out more at that summit if it takes place, but if it were to occur, this would be the first time in 4 years that the leaders of both Ukraine and Russia would see each other face to face. But it is yet to be seen whether that would be just an about face from that Russian president as Ukraine continues to be bombarded with Russian attacks, particularly in the Kharkiv as well as Zaporizhia regions. But we're hoping to find out more later today.
Angela Skujins there reporting live from Brussels on the upcoming high-level talks concerning possibly ending the war in Ukraine. Angela, thank you very much for being here with us today. Now we're moving on to our next story. Yesterday, on Wednesday, Poland's new President Karol Nawrocki has outlined the tenets of his foreign policy agenda. Now, during his speech, he has mentioned criticism of the European Union as well as Ukraine. Now, Ukraine was previously mentioned during his campaign speeches. However, Wednesday's speech actually did not include much on that subject. Let's take a look now at some of the details from our very own Michel von Blumenstein.
In his acceptance speech, new Polish President Karol Nawrocki was clear about what he thought of the European Union.
I will, of course, support our relations within the European Union, but I will not agree to the European Union taking away competencies from Poland, especially those that are not mentioned in the European treaties, and they should remain unchanged.
And he was clear about his priorities in relationship building.
I will support our most important alliances, including our bilateral partnerships with the United States, and I will also look after Poland's position within NATO.
Nawrocki did not refer directly to the Russian full-scale war in Ukraine or to the continued Polish support for Kyiv. Capitalizing on the growing skepticism towards Ukraine among Polish voters, Nawrocki frequently voiced his opposition to Ukraine joining the EU or even NATO during his campaign, which put him firmly at odds with his predecessor, fellow conservative Andrzej Duda.
Karol Nawrocki decided to show some assertive positions toward Ukraine, but it doesn't mean that he will stop the support from Poland or stop, for example, fighting with the Russian propaganda, Russian activity in European Union or NATO countries.
A specific foreign policy item Nawrocki does champion is his wish to expand the Bucharest Nine. The group of countries that make up NATO's eastern flank should bring in the alliance's newest members, Sweden and Finland, to strengthen it. But as analyst Andreas Umland told TVP World, this would require some ideological gymnastics on Nawrocki's part.
If he goes this way, if he tries to improve with his instruments the connections to the Nordic countries, that will of course mean that a very pro-Ukrainian stance in foreign affairs, a very Russia-critical approach, and also a pro-European approach.
At the same time, Nawrocki prides himself on his good relationship with US President Donald Trump. That, according to some pundits, is a great advantage.
Remember that even our government, which is less liberal and more critics towards Donald Trump, now try to build a good relation with the Trump. Because for everybody in Poland is obviously that Polish security depends on the US.
Ultimately, Poland's foreign policy is set by the government of Prime Minister Donald Tusk. But Nawrocki seems poised to make his mark as well.
Niech Bóg błogosławi Polsce! Niech żyje Polska!
For TVP World, Michiel von Blommestein.
Moving on to a related story, and it's time for a quote. I think he will be a strong defender of sovereignty and keeping as much power on a state level as possible. These are the words of the president of the Jagiellonian club, Paweł Musiałek, about the upcoming tenure of newly sworn-in President of Poland, Karol Nawrocki. In an interview with TVP World, Musiałek concluded that Nawrocki's term in office would likely be similar to that of his predecessor, Andrzej Duda.
I think that he will be strong defenders of sovereignty and keeping as much power on a state level as it possible. So if, for example, we will have a discussion in European Union about the EU treaties changes, I think that Nawrocki would be a politician who strongly support status quo, or even maybe to some extent retransfer this some competence toward Warsaw. So on the field of EU policy, I think that his position would be the same as Andrzej Duda. Andrzej Duda declared the same position through the whole decade. I think that the same continuity will see on a relation between Poland and United States. Of course, his personal relation with Donald Trump.
President of the United States announced that he will impose 100% tariffs on imported semiconductor chips and processors. During a meeting with reporters in the Oval Office, Donald Trump emphasized that companies that have declared they will manufacture electronic devices in the United States will be exempt from the tariffs. Apple, for example, is already trying to actively avoid these tariffs and has pledged to invest on the US soil.
The president made the announcement at the White House with Apple CEO Tim Cook.
The good news for companies like Apple is if you're building in the United States or have committed to build, without question committed to build in the United States, there will be no charge. In other words, we're not going to be charging. So a lot of countries, a lot of companies are leaving various other places and they're coming to the United States. So in other words, we'll be putting a tariff on of approximately 100% on chips and semiconductors. But if you're building in the United States of America, there's no charge, even though you're building and you're not producing yet in terms of the big numbers of jobs and all of the things that you're building. If you're building, there will be no charge.
On Wednesday, Apple also came forth with the intention to invest $100 billion in the U.S., thus ticking off the requirement for investment commitment and sidestepping potential tariffs on iPhones. But some experts argue that this does not necessarily equal more jobs, especially with AI in the game.
Right now, the announcement did not convince me that that's what would happen. More investments in AI data centers is likely, in fact, to lead to fewer jobs as AI and technology, eat up jobs, replace jobs. I like the motivation. I'm just not seeing that that's the outcome we're going to get.
Most Apple's production facilities are in Asia, primarily in China, although it has shifted some production to Vietnam, Thailand, and India in recent years. Trump threatened the company in May with 25% tariffs on products manufactured overseas. Reuters reports that Trump's efforts to reshape global trade through tariffs cost Apple $800 million just in the June quarter.
The recent trade deal between the United States and Japan includes Tokyo agreeing to drop additional safety tests on American vehicle imports. While Trump wants to see more American-made cars on Japanese streets, his idea may not bear fruit, as many Japanese still see them as simply too big and too expensive.
Yuki Mineta bought an American SUV over 2 years ago, and now it has become an indispensable part of her family. Despite its size, she manages to squeeze the car into small alleyways of her Tokyo neighborhood.
Japanese roads and parking lots are narrow, so I was worried about buying a big car, but surprisingly, there are more and more lots that are easy to park in these days.
Nita had always wanted to drive what she described as a big cool car and is already onto her second American SUV purchase. Given the rising costs of imported American cars, however, she can't imagine buying one at the current market price.
I do not think I would want to buy a Jeep now. It is so expensive. I did not think prices would get so high.
While Donald Trump's trade deals were aimed at popularizing American cars in Japan, manufacturers from Detroit might have a hard time in the land of the rising sun, mostly due to Japan's cityscape.
In Japan, especially in Tokyo, parking lots are really small. Some places even have mechanical parking systems where you put your car on an elevator, something unimaginable in the US. In those kinds of places, cars of this size simply won't fit.
Apart from space, there are other problems when importing American vehicles into Japan. There is the airfare from the United States and import taxes. Then there are also transportation costs from the airport to the dealer's location. Moreover, Japanese buying American cars must wait quite a while until they receive their new vehicles.
Our cars can't be delivered to customers immediately after being brought to Japan, so we service them and replace some parts before delivery. So, for instance, this Chevy pickup truck only arrived last month. The parts are currently being procured in the US, so it will probably be completed after the upcoming holiday at the end of August.
Over the past year, Japanese people bought 3.7 million new cars, 6% of which were made abroad. Of those, just over 11,000 were American-made. According to analysts, the recent trade deal will not change the statistic.
Really, to sell more here, you'd have to make an investment here. And given that, this is one of the smaller major markets, and that the prospects of them selling a lot more are probably slim, I don't see any American makers really investing any money here to lift their sales presence in Japan.
According to experts, however, even after Japan relaxes some restrictions, American automakers are unlikely to push to sell more cars in the country.
And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and please stay with us here on TVP World.